ask Paul and Ashraf, both of you, I mean, one can get confused here between whether we are alleviating poverty or growing economies, and are we trying to do both at the same time, and can they be done together? Paul, and then...
Yeah. To be honest, I think poverty alleviation has not been a good criterion by which to navigate. Poverty alleviation is an outcome of getting a growth strategy right. But really, you've got to navigate on what are the bottlenecks and how you break them. If you can break the bottlenecks, you'll bring poverty down. And so that sometimes means not directly targeting the poor. It means targeting the bottlenecks. Right? So, for example, Betty gave this great example of, as it were, unfocused, untargeted, unstrategic training. Tailors in a post-conflict environment. Right? What we need in a post-conflict environment is bricklayers, plumbers, people who can build. Every time you create some mundane skills there, you can also employ a lot of totally unskilled people. But the unskilled people on their own are useless unless they are matched with some skilled people. And so, a very simple thing to do. Right? Sponsor a technical college that trains up the really mundane construction skills as a first step in reconstruction.
To build on Paul, the first thing in a post-conflict situation is complexity. You have to balance security, politics, and development simultaneously. Yeah. Because without that, you really cannot create the environment for creating an economy. And in a post-conflict situation, I would not have dinner with my cabinet colleagues prior to the September 11th. A lot of them were outright criminals. But politics requires, peace requires making deals of those kinds. And it has to be recognized that there are real constraints. And second, there are global interests that make warlords your colleagues. And if that is not recognized, you're not going to get traction. Second is that the current modality of global procurement of goods and services is anti-developmental. Because
you're saying it's
anti-developmental of the local economies. The very thing that Paul is mentioning, the construction sector, is given for competitive bidding. But who comes to bid in a post-conflict environment but the most corrupt firms? So formally, you comply with criteria, but none of these developmental institutions is focused on a really cohesive agenda. It takes maximum of 6 months to train all the bricklayers, electricians, etc. It's not rocket science. But it's not been done in a single post-conflict country. You need supply chain management. Singapore did this to excellence, and because of that, 96% of housing in Singapore is provided by the public sector. You need insurance. You need leasing operations. The building blocks of building an economy practically are what textbook economics in general and the developmental practices of these institutions fail to focus on. So if we can focus on those things, we can get the traction. And here comes the question of youth. I did a very large survey in Afghanistan again. Conflict is looming again. And I asked the people who had carried out the survey, what is the definition of a Talib? And they said an unemployed youth. For $50, people have been blowing up bridges that have cost $500,000. And we need to focus on the youth. They don't want out. They want into the globalization process. But unless we have an agenda of creating middle classes in these places and opening up the prospect of upward social mobility, we really cannot bring peace. And that requires a double perspective, both the politics of hope and the economics of growth.